Section of this chapter is devoted to how you govern complex societies, what kinds of mechanisms you have in order to have social and political order. There are a couple different ways that we have. You can have formal rules about what should and shouldn't be done. We usually call it when there's a rule about something you should or shouldn't do. A law. Laws. You don't want to break the law, then something bad happens to you. So that's one way that we enforce social order. But your textbook mentions that there are also informal rules, what we call norms. That's just expected that people do a certain thing. And there may not be a law against it, but why would you do that? So people might, we talked about a couple classes ago, people might gossip about you if you're breaking the norm, and that helps to enforce the social order. And all societies, or you might say that some societies depend more upon norms, on ideas that they have about how people should behave, and less upon formal written down laws. And other societies tend toward more laws, maybe don't concern themselves with the norms. You can see how this is in some ways has been playing out in our own society. There is this idea that people, when they are, say, the president, they are abide by certain norms. And everybody just thought, well, a president would never do such a thing because why? But it turns out that wasn't a law, not a rule. So you just break the norm and do whatever you want. Tariffs for everybody. Thought that was against the law? No, that's fine. There's no rule. There's no law against it. So we find out that that was just a norm. And if you want to break it, go for it. In some ways, this can be extended to systems of justice. You're in a program that is called criminal justice, bringing the criminals to justice. How do we do that? Well, what are the forms of justice we might talk about? Okay, so we have the formal justice system. All right, that's what the laws, the courts we have to go through. Those are the things that we, in some ways, talked about, those going through the formal system. What else do we have sometimes? There's also forms of what we call informal justice. Things that are not necessarily, there's not a law, but the society in some ways, by the actions of its members, is helping to regulate this people's behavior. Now, this can take different forms. A lot of you got concerned about one form that it takes, but for now, let's just say that sometimes in an informal justice system, the sanctions are that you are shunned. You don't get to be a part of the group anymore. And that might not sound so bad. You're just like, okay, I'll do my own thing. But if you depend upon the group for, say, food and resources and you get shunned, it can be a quite disciplining thing. Or you can be shamed. You can have to apologize publicly or feel, again, these are informal ways in which societies might not necessarily throw somebody in jail, but it can be a very effective way of keeping people doing what they're supposed to be doing. So we have formal justice and informal justice. Now, the textbook mentions, well, what about the government of the state? Now, by state, we mean not New York State. We mean any form of government which is over a territory. And your book cites, well, they don't cite this person because he's so assumed that everybody knows who this is who came up with this idea. But it's an idea that comes to us from Max Weber back in 1918 in one of his lectures. And the idea is that a state is the entity or the body that has a monopoly on legitimate violence within a territory. That is to say, you're not supposed to commit violence. If you do, that's against the law and you get thrown in jail. But the state is the one that can do it, and that's perceived as legitimate. So Peter comes up here, punches me in the nose. Am I allowed? Well, I can probably punch him back. But can I then pull out a knife? No, I should not. What should I do as long as he doesn't keep punching me in the nose? What am I supposed to do now that he's stopped punching me? Call the police. Then the police come in And if he's still punching me, or if I'm punching him, if I pulled out a knife, if I'm trying to knife Peter and they shoot me, that's legit. I was trying to kill somebody and they killed me. So boom. No, that's legit. That'd be fine. See what I'm saying? I can't knife somebody. You're not supposed to. Call the police. The police have to use violence to stop violence. That's okay. But they're the ones that have legitimate use of violence in a territory. Now, brings up a question is that how is state power, why if I'm wearing a badge, why is that perceived as legitimate? Oh, yes, it's a good thing I'm picking on Peter. There's a big word for this. How do we get to a place where we perceive state power as like, yeah, that's fine. I'll agree with that. Hegemony, this big word called hegemony. Some people use hegemony as a synonym for power. It means power, but it's a twist on it. It's power through consent. We agree that certain people should be in power and other people not so much. And so if you have hegemony, you don't have explicit violence or domination. So you can have a power dynamic where you're just dominating people. Maybe it's a colonial relationship. You've just taken over their land in a war. That's violent or dominating power. But hegemony is when we kind of agree on this. It's power, but it comes to us because we all believe that, oh yeah, if you're a police officer, then yeah, we respect that. And so you have these ideas about, well, where did this power come from? Oh, well, George Washington and the history of America. And we learn these ideas about capitalism and the world, and then we all agree on them, even if we're not necessarily going to be the beneficiaries of this power. Are there any billionaires out there? Have you ever met a billionaire? Shook their hand. Is there anyone who is expecting to be a billionaire soon? Jaw? Yeah? How's that working? I know, I want to be a billionaire too, and it's not working out right. I'm not sure if criminal justice is actually the billionaire major. Not sure if that's going to work. Yeah, no, it's curious in our society. In fact, there's more billionaires than ever, and they seem to be running things, and I don't seem to be one of them, and it makes me mad, but we just go along with it. I might be a billionaire pretty soon. I'm going to make it. American dream. You're telling me I'm not going to be able to be a billionaire? You're destroying my dream? So, am I going to be a billionaire or not? No. Yeah, no, the billionaires do not want to give away their money, do they? They'd rather build a spaceship and go up in space or float around on a yacht. In fact, they spend a lot of time trying not to be taxed, move to different countries and get out of the taxation system and keep themselves in a different place. You rarely see billionaires. If you think about the old days, say in Oneonta, go down to Walnut Street, where you'll see mansions, Victorian mansions, when we used to build beautiful things. Now, honestly, we didn't all have access to those mansions, and that was bad. But at least you knew who the rich people were. You could go down and you could trick or treat them and you could shake their hands. Where are the billionaires? We don't see them. Don't ever see them. Can't get to them. And now you're telling me I can't even be one. Bummer. Oh yeah, if you can make $15 an hour as opposed to $7.50, I am all for that. But honestly, I'm not getting to be a billionaire from that. And that's what I'm trying to say to you is, although we believe that we're going to be up in the top, this is an American dream, unfortunately, the real reality of this is most people are not going to be billionaires. They're just not. They're going to be stuck in their situation. Now, the idea of hegemony actually comes to us from an Italian social theorist named Antonio Gramsci, who lived a short life. He only got to be 46 years old. You can look at this up on YouTube and have somebody else explain his theory of hegemony. He's an interesting character. This idea comes from what are called his prison notebooks, because Gramsci was in prison in Italy under Mussolini, under a fascist dictatorship, and he was trying to prompt a revolution. He was a Marxian, Marxist type revolutionary, and he was, at the time they probably didn't have billionaires, he was probably railing against the millionaires. And so he was trying to get the people to rise up. Instead, he got thrown in jail. So he had to write in these notebooks. Some people believe that he used complicated words because he was being censored. And so he invented words like hegemony to get around the censors because they weren't smart enough to know what that meant. But it did give us this different twist on social life because his key question was, if things are so unequal, and if everybody is in this situation, as has just been described, where the top are on top and the bottom are on the bottom, and we're not going to change the situation, why aren't the people revolutioning? Why am I in this jail instead of people overthrowing the government? And so that's why he came up with the idea of hegemony is why do we accept the system? Why do we accept this system when it can be so unequal for people? And so this is a picture from Brazil of a shanty town next to a huge apartment complex where there's just a wall between the people who have and the people who don't. And they use this as a way of talking about the ways in which the people in the shantytown part of things have forms of self-governance and are able to use informal justice. So these are the place where the police really don't come. And if they come, they probably just want to kill people. Brazilian police in many parts of it are even more notorious for this kind of violence. And so people have developed their own forms of justice to make sure people aren't stealing things from each other and stuff like that. Now, this does sound nice to have your own informal form of justice. Yeah, well, it's kind of dramatic. It sounds nice that you have your own informal system of justice. Oh, yeah, poor people banding together until you find out they just lynched somebody that was stealing something. So it doesn't necessarily have a good side to it, or it can have a bad side to it. And your textbook also says that actually the elites, the people in these big, great apartment complexes and stuff like that, also use self-governance and ideas about this to protect their stuff. And so they live in these things that they are like fortified enclaves, like gated communities, except the gates are even more strongly regulated, and you have somebody standing out there with guns to keep people out of them. For any of you who've ever traveled in parts of Latin America, that and sometimes security is quite privatized. But in our own society, we never see the billionaires. So, going back to the deep assumptions, for those of you who are in class from the beginning, these are already in your notes. For those of you who weren't, they'll be up on PowerPoint later, because these have to disappear. What we've been doing is questioning these deep assumptions and trying to understand that a lot of these things don't necessarily make sense. But why are we doing this? Because if we get rid of these ideas or assumptions or the hegemonic thought that has been governing our lives, we realize that, hey, if it hasn't been this way, it doesn't need to be this way exactly. It can be different. So, as Gramsci put it, the old world is dying. The new world struggles to be born. Now is a time of monsters. If you're sitting around in a fascist prison in Italy, come up with cool things like that. You didn't get to see the old world, the new world being born, but maybe we'll get to see it.